Since for last few days we are trying to use Linux and how to work in Linux, and for that what we have done is I have created a VM on my local machine, and every time I try to connect to that VM I try to use SSH. And so I just thought maybe I should I don't know, talk a bit more about SSH, and because SSH is very important. So in order to use SSH is nothing but a protocol, like a standard or like a rule that help us to securely connect to remote machines for remote logins and remote file transfers. And on especially on Linux machine, we use a tool called OpenSSH, and that tool uses this protocol, that is SSH. So I think currently OpenSSH has a version 9.8, or I'm not sure, 9 point something. Let me see what version I have. You should have a good version. Yes, I have a 9.2 version of OpenSSH, which is good enough. So that means my system will be working with a good protocol. And since I have a 9.2 version of OpenSSH, that means my SSH will be using variety 2. So there are two varieties of SSH, SSH1 and SSH2. So I will not try to go into too much into it, but just for this video we will take into account that SSH2 is much better than SSH1. Alright, so whenever you are using OpenSSH, so make sure that your SSH is SSH2, your protocol is 2. Okay. So alright, let's get inside our VM. SSH, her username @ host name. Voila, I'm inside VM. So if you have seen my other videos, you must have noticed that I was using a password authentication system, but today I'm not doing that because I have made some changes to my configuration files. So for somebody who is watching this video, and if you are new to the whole Linux thing and you must be wondering what is a configuration file, what is she talking about? So in our operating systems we call these things like SSH, not just SSH, everything is a service, right? So SSH is basically a service, and so in order for this service to run in a particular way, our computers, our systems have certain files which contain certain rules. Okay, so when this service starts, this service should follow XYZ rules, and these rules are written in those configuration files, right? And so, and in fact most of these services, just like SSH, they are enabled. What I mean by enable is that they automatically start when your systems boot up. And you might have seen that we don't usually get like a graphic user interface or like a great command line tools and etc. to interact with these services, because normally we don't need to, because whatever the default settings come up with these services are good enough to work with, and we don't really like need to like change them unless you have certain specific requirements. So today I am going to like talk a bit about like hardening SSH. So before you try to attempt to harden your own SSH by looking at this video, I would suggest that don't do it, because if you don't know, if you are new to SSH and you don't know what you're doing, then you don't need to harden it. The default settings are really good enough. You just look at this video, maybe read more about it, and once you feel like, okay, I need these particular changes in my system, only then harden it. Otherwise, don't harden it. All right. So the SSH has basically two parts. Okay, there is a server side and there is a client side. So the client side is like let's say in this case, my laptop, my personal laptop is the client side of the SSH, because I try to connect to my VM, and the VM in this case is server side, right? So there are going to be two different configuration files, one for the client side and other for the system side. We can also see like, okay, so SSH files are present in our cd sc ssh directory ls. So these are the configuration files right here. These are keys. Okay, we'll talk about them later. So these config files. Yeah, these are configured files, but here these are ssh underscore config. These are ssd underscore config. So the ssd one are server side configuration file. So they have rules about when I try to connect to about a server, like if your system is a server, like if some type of client try to connect to me, what kind of like rules I should follow. And the ssh underscore config file, this one, sorry, so this will have rules about, okay, as a client, if I'm trying to connect to a remote server, what kind of rules I should follow, right? So this is going to be inside these files. And so like I said earlier, like most of the services, SSH is enabled by default in most of the modern Linux system, but we can always check whether it's enabled or not, what is the status, whether is it closed or enabled or what. So in this machine, let's say I try system ctl status, okay, yeah, ssh.service. So what is saying, this is the name of my service. All right, it's loaded, okay, from this location. Service name is there. The service file is loaded from a specific path, right? And it's enabled at the boot. Enable means that as soon as my computer starts, the service also starts automatically, and this applies to not just SSH. There's so many services which we call the background processes or daemons which automatically start. It is currently active, right? And since the time period, okay. All right, documentation for service can be found in these man pages. All right. This is the process ID. Okay, good enough. As we already know that our SSH is active right now. So what we are trying to do, we are trying to harden our SSH, and we are trying to make some changes in the setting of SSH, and for that we need to get inside the configuration files, that is inside our SSH directory, and the file is sshd underscore config. So we are trying to make changes on the SSH server configuration, okay. But before we do that, I would like to create a backup. So yeah, SSH in case in case you make some mistake and you realize, okay, I have somehow destroyed my system so you have a copy of things with you. Okay, so now we have created a file with this name. So in case like you or me somehow we manage to destroy our config file, we still have a backup to roll back to. Alright, so somehow destroyed my system, so you have a copy of things with you. Okay, so now we have created a file with this name. So in case like you or me somehow we manage to destroy our config file, we still have a backup to roll back to. Alright, so let's get inside our server file. Okay, so to go inside the server file, we need to get inside the configuration file. Yeah, this is our config file. So now we are inside the configuration file, and yes, this is SSH server system-wide configuration file. So this is for the server side. Let's say your machine, and this particular machine is on this particular VM is acting as a server. So this file will help us create settings or set rules for the incoming traffic from different clients, and whatever changes we make to these files will apply system-wide. Alright, so this is port 22. This is like the conventional or the default port on which our SSH connect to. You can always change this port. This is like a very normal tactic you use and people use in order to make the system and server more secure. Let's say you can make it this or something, whatever the port is possible for you within 65,000. I think it's 65,000, right? So you make changes to the port and just make sure, in case let's say your port was uncommented like this, that means this part is frozen, and in order to activate this part you just have to uncomment it, right? So now port 22 is available and 2222. all right, and you can make all these changes as well in different. Public key authentication is yes, public key authentication is very important. So as I was telling you earlier, that I was actually typing password. I was using password authentication every time I will use SSH to get inside my VM. It will ask me a password. I will type in a password, but that is not the most secure way to use SSH. So the most secure way to use SSH is by using our keys. So the keys are of two types. There is the private key and the public key. So the private key is like super secret, and only you have, and the machine you are working on, right? Only this particular laptop or this machine will have the private key. No one else will have the private key. But the public key is something you can put it anywhere. You can put it on a website, you can post it on Facebook, you can put public key anywhere you want to, right? So how does this public key authentication and private key authentication work? So let's say our laptop has to connect to a server, right? So instead of like doing simple like like username and password type of thing, we try to connect to a server via the help of keys. So we make sure that our private key is on the laptop. You have to make sure you cannot share your private key with anyone else. The private key has to be on the machine, right? The machine you are using to connect to that server. All right. And our public key is on the server. So our private key is on our machine and the public key is on the server. It's connect to a server, but you connect to a server in a way so that the server's public key and your private key are equivalent to each other. So this is how they identify the machine. This is how server identify your machine. Okay. And so the public key, it can be calculated from a private key, but not vice versa, right? And this is very important. The public key can be calculated from the private key, not vice versa. So once we send that request to a server, we show them, okay, I want to connect to you, but via private key, and you have to connect me with your public key, which should be equivalent to my private key. So on the server side, it generates a random string of like character, numbers and symbols, and which is then encrypted by using the public key that we had given to the server, right? And then the server sends that random string to us, and we decrypt that random string using our private key. Only our private key can decrypt that random string, and this tells the server that this is the right computer, this is the right machine. Yeah, this person has the private key, so I should be able to talk to this person, and I should let this person communicate with me. I should let this person like remote login or everything. Yeah, so this is how authentication works. Okay, I hope this helps you understand, and just do a little bit of research from your end. So it's this simple thing. So that's we have done. So this is why the public key authentication is yes, because it's more secure, because your private key is very unique to you and your machine, and it makes sure that you are the right person and the machine who's connecting to the server, and the server will have the public key. What we can do, there are so many things like password authentication. It says yes, but it's commented like it's not active. But password authentication, no. Okay, no password authentication. I'm telling my SSH settings too. Okay, no, I shouldn't be allowed to connect with the passwords, right? Only with public key, that because it's more safe. And disable permit empty passwords, no. So this way the account should be protected and the user should be held accountable. For this reason, the usage of the empty password should not be allowed. Yeah, this also can be uncommented. Yeah, this okay. PAM is also something very useful that you can use. I'm not going to discuss about PAM here. It is again authentication system. Use PAM. Of course, this is the also authentication system, and this can be helpful. You should keep it as yes. Another simple trick that you can use is you can also uncomment these things: client alive interval, client alive count max. So when we use SSH to make connection to the server, basically this client alive interval, it specifies the time interval that server will wait for before sending like an empty packet to keep the connection alive, right? This helps in keeping the connection open through the firewalls or through NAT routers that might close on an idle connection. So you can also like change the setting. I'm not going to change the settings, but you can also like make it like 60 seconds or something, whatever. And another same thing, client alive count max. It's basically just about the number of the client alive messages or packets that can be sent without receiving any response from the client before the server disconnects the session. So if a server sends a number of alive messages without receiving any response from the client, it will terminate the session, and this will tell us, okay, you can send like 3 packets to the client, and if the client doesn't respond, we will terminate the session after 3 messages or 3 packets. They work great together, and if you want to uncomment that, you can uncomment them. I'm gonna keep it just like how it is, because it is like I told you earlier, you don't need to make changes to your settings if you don't have any reason. If you have a good reason to make changes, go ahead, make changes. What else is there? So yeah, all these things can be like change, and you can in fact like add for example, let's say I only want certain users to like connect. Okay, I only want, let's say there are so many, I only want like allow users mic, so I don't want any other user to use SSH to log into my system. I am allowing mic, so only mic will be able to SSH into the system, right? So this is one of the use cases that we can use. We can also allow groups of people, like if there are like 4 or 5 people in a particular group, we can put those people in a group, and then we can allow that group. So these kind of things can be done as well. So this was the configuration changes that you can make on server side, and for that you have to go into this file sshd _config. Okay, but what if you want to make changes on the client side? What if you want to make changes on your system? Like, okay, I'm a client, I don't own a server, right? Like, I don't own a server. Like, okay, maybe you're never going to own a server. I just want to make sure that when I connect to a server that I am secure. So what I'm going to do then, in order to do that, you have to, like I told you, have to make changes to ssh _config file, ssh _config.d. these file, this directory and this file. This is where you have to make the changes. SSHD is for server. This works. You have to make the changes in setting when you are a server, but when you're a client, you have to make changes here. Okay, so when you are a client, let's say you can be a single user and you can make changes throughout the system, right? But you can be multiple users. Let's say there are like a lot of people using the system, or it's over a network. So you can like make changes to this file. Let's say you plan to make changes to sudo vim this is SSH client system-wide configuration file. This is right, you can see. So this is for SSH client, and system-wide changes will occur if you make any changes to this file. Again, these are all the details that you can change, as well as you can also like make some additions, whatever you want to, right? But whatever you do here will happen system wide. Let's say if there are 4 users on the system, then all these changes may apply to all 4 users. But maybe you don't want to make these changes for all the users. Maybe you only want these changes for like certain users, right? Okay, maybe you want let's say there's people from like particular team that you want them to connect to these particular areas, but there are people from other team you want them to connect to particular areas you don't want them to. So in that case, you can also like create specific user SSH config files. That can happen. So let's come out of this and let's again. So for that you have to make changes in this file. It should be called .sh/config. Okay, make sure this is .sh/config file. Alright, so this site is a directory. Create a dot. If you don't already have this file, create a .sh/config file. So if you do not have a .sh file, let's create one. Okay, mkdir file exists. Okay, where the hell is my file? Okay, looks like file already exists. Okay, so I am simply gonna create this config file ssh config. Okay, now I've created a config file, and here I can make some changes. So let's say host is example.com. Well, example.com user, my user identity file is .ssh id_rsa. Okay, and preferred authentications. Public key authentications are important. Preferred authentications, public key, and pub key. Authentication, yes. Voila. So now we have created inside our .sh config file and for a particular host, and it's great. So this is what you can do. Okay, I hope this helps you understand some of the basic concepts of SSH and help you navigate with SSH.